You already know something is off. Not with her. With the advice. You've been told that being consistent, available, and emotionally present is the move. And it makes sense on paper. Good guy shows up, good guy communicates, good guy gets the girl. Except you've watched that play out in real time, and the story doesn't end that way. You've been the guy who did everything right, texted back fast, cleared his schedule, showed up without hesitation, and somehow that made things worse. She got quieter, more distant, less interested, not more. And nobody gave you a clean explanation for why. They just told you to keep being yourself, which is great advice when being yourself is working and completely useless when it isn't. Here's the thing nobody says directly. Desire is not a reward for effort. It doesn't work on a merit system. A woman doesn't become more attracted to you because you're trying harder. If anything, the harder you try in the visible, performative sense, the less her nervous system registers you as something worth chasing. That's not cruel. That's not unfair. It's just how attraction actually works when you stop confusing it with approval. So let's talk about what's actually happening beneath the surface. Because once you understand it, everything you've been confused about starts making a specific kind of sense. Attraction, at its core, is a nervous system response. It's not a decision. A woman doesn't sit down and rationally conclude she should feel butterflies. It rises in her involuntarily based on signals her system receives about your state, your centeredness, your relationship to your own life. And the most powerful signal you can send, the one that creates that rising, involuntary pull, is not how much you want her. It's how full you are without her. That's the thing that breaks most men's mental model. They assume that demonstrating desire creates desire, that showing her she's wanted makes her feel the pull in return. But that's backwards. Demonstrated need signals emptiness, and emptiness doesn't attract, it repels. Not because she's cold, not because she's playing games, but because her nervous system is doing exactly what it's designed to do. It's reading the signal you're sending and responding accordingly. The signal that says, I have built my life around your attention is not the signal of a man with gravity. It's the signal of a man waiting to be filled by someone else, and you cannot create desire in someone by letting them know you need them to survive. This is where the two failure modes live. You've probably seen both of them, maybe lived inside one or both yourself. The first man, call him Max, is everywhere all the time. He texts first every morning. He responds in seconds. He moves plans for her. He checks in when she goes quiet. He makes himself maximally available because somewhere he picked up the idea that presence equals devotion and devotion creates attraction. What he's actually creating is something closer to low-grade anxiety. Not in a dramatic way, in the quiet way that makes her feel like something heavy is resting on the conversation. Every interaction carries a kind of invisible weight. He's not just talking to her. He needs something from the exchange. She can feel that. And the feeling it creates isn't warmth. It's the faint, guilty discomfort of being depended on by someone you haven't chosen to be responsible for. The second man, call him Zero, does the opposite. He disappears. He goes cold for days without reason. He withholds himself as a strategy, believing that artificial distance creates longing. And sometimes it appears to work, at first, which is what makes it so misleading. What he's actually created is not desire. It's anxiety. She reaches for him not because she's drawn to him, but because the uncertainty is intolerable. That's not attraction. That's an anxious response to inconsistency. And she can feel the difference, even if she can't immediately name it. The coldness doesn't read as mystery, it reads as instability. And instability might keep her orbiting, but it never makes her feel safe enough to fall. Both men are operating on the same flawed logic, that her attention is the goal and that managing her access to you is the tool. What they're both missing is that none of it works without the thing underneath. A man who is genuinely in motion. A man whose life is full enough that his rhythms aren't performances. They're just the natural consequence of someone who has things going on. Here's what that actually looks like in practice. A man with a real life replies when he's available and doesn't think twice about it. Not as a strategy, not because he's trying to create a sensation, because he's in the middle of something that matters to him and he's there when he's there. That rhythm, present when present, absent when absent, neither apologetic nor theatrical about either, creates a completely different feeling in her nervous system. It signals stability. It signals self-possession. And self-possession is one of the most quietly magnetic things a man can project, because it answers the one question her nervous system is always asking. Does this person have a center, or are they orbiting mine? The rhythm of a man with gravity is not manufactured. It's not a schedule he maintains to seem interesting. It's what happens when you stop treating her attention as the primary organizing principle of your day. When your morning routine doesn't start with checking if she's replied. When you genuinely lose track of time in something that matters to you and come back to your phone 2 hours later without the internal flinch of someone who has been waiting. That absence of flinching, that quiet self-containment, translates. She feels it as steadiness, and steadiness is the foundation of trust, and trust is the foundation of wanting someone close. Now let's get specific, because general principles only take you so far. The first pattern that kills attraction before it has a chance to build is what happens around texting. And it's worth pulling apart because men make the same mistake in slightly different ways. Over-texting isn't really about volume, it's about need made visible. When a man sends a second message before the first one gets a reply, when he escalates in length as she gets shorter, when he starts narrating his day in real time, the subtext is simple. I need to know where I stand with you. And that need, communicated repeatedly and without filter, tells her everything about the quality of his inner life. It says his baseline state is anxious, that her attention regulates his sense of self. And a man whose internal temperature rises and falls based on her response time is not a man who projects calm. He's a man who requires management. The fix isn't to text less as a rule, it's to genuinely have more going on than her response. When that's true, your texting rhythm finds its own natural shape, and that shape communicates something entirely different. The second pattern is the one where a man builds his whole life around her availability. He clears his calendar the moment she signals interest. He cancels plans with friends to be free when she might want to see him. He tells himself this is prioritization. What he's actually done is handed her the blueprint of a man with no gravity of his own. A man who can rearrange everything for someone he barely knows yet doesn't have a strong center. He has an open field that someone else can fill. And a woman, even one who consciously tells herself she wants to be prioritized, will feel faintly unsettled by this. Because it doesn't feel like devotion. It feels like she accidentally became the most important thing in someone's life before she decided if she wanted that responsibility. Keep your life intact, not as a tactic, as a sign of health. Let her see that you have something worth interrupting. The third pattern runs deeper and is harder to name. It's the pattern where a man shrinks himself to avoid threatening her or making her uncomfortable. He softens his opinions, mirrors her perspective, agrees before he's heard himself think. He conflates self-erasure with emotional intelligence. But here's what's actually happening in her experience. She is slowly losing the thing she is trying to locate. The signal is getting weaker, not because he's doing anything wrong in the conventional sense, but because he's removing himself, his actual self, with edges and opinions and friction, from the equation, and she cannot feel drawn to what she cannot distinctly feel. Desire requires contrast. It requires a you that is separate from her. Think about what it actually feels like to be in a conversation with someone who has no resistance, who agrees with everything, softens every edge, never pushes back. After a while, it stops feeling respectful and starts feeling hollow. Because you're not actually talking to someone. You're talking into a mirror that reflects you back at yourself. There's no friction, no surprise, no sense that a distinct person is sitting across from you with their own interior. That absence of distinction is the absence of attraction. You can't chase something you can't locate. And a man who erases his own outline in the name of being agreeable has made himself impossible to locate. This is where the mechanisms that create genuine, lasting desire start to become clear. The first one is attention density. Not duration, not frequency, density. There is a specific experience a person has when they feel that someone is actually looking at them. Not at their surface or their type or what they represent, but at the specific texture of who they are. It's rare. It makes a person feel seen in a way that is difficult to forget. A man who is genuinely curious, not performing curiosity, not running through a list of good questions, creates this experience naturally. He notices the detail that she didn't expect someone to catch. He remembers the thing she mentioned in passing. He asks the follow-up question. He's interested in the particular, not the general, and that quality of attention lands in her nervous system differently than everything else because it signals this person is actually here. Most men give attention broadly and shallowly. They are physically present but mentally elsewhere, half listening, constructing their next sentence while she finishes hers. The man who reverses that, who actually receives what she's saying, who treats her words as worth tracking, creates a contrast against every other interaction she has that day. And contrast is the mechanism through which things become memorable. That experience becomes a memory. And memories are what a woman returns to when she's alone and thinking about you. The second mechanism is subtler. It's what happens when you reflect back to her a version of herself that is more interesting than the one she usually sees, not through flattery, not through compliments, but through the kinds of observations and questions that make her think in directions she doesn't normally go. A man who makes a woman feel more intelligent, more layered, more surprising to herself. That man gets attached to, quietly and powerfully, because he's become associated with a feeling she wants more of. This isn't a technique. You can't fake genuine perception, but you can develop it by actually being curious about people, by asking real questions, by caring about the answer. The third mechanism is the one most men either overuse or accidentally neglect: contrast. Specifically, what your absence creates relative to your presence. When you are fully present, not distracted, not performing, but actually there, and then you return to your life, your natural movement away creates something. She notices the space differently than she did before you filled it. That noticing is the beginning of thinking about you when she's trying not to. But this only works if your presence was genuinely something. If it wasn't, if you were there but distracted, or there but needing, then your absence is just absence. Contrast requires a high enough signal to begin with, and here's where everything collapses or coheres. All of this, the rhythm, the attention, the contrast, works if it's the natural expression of a man who is actually full. And it falls apart, or worse, becomes something quietly toxic, if it's deployed by a man who is running on empty. There's a version of a man who reads all of this and immediately starts recalibrating his behavior. He starts managing his reply times. He engineers space with deliberate care. He asks better questions. Not because he's curious, but because he's been told it works. And for a while, maybe a surprisingly long while, it appears to work. She responds differently. The dynamic shifts. He feels like he cracked something. But a man who uses rhythm as a tactic is still running on the same empty core as Max and Zero. He's just more sophisticated about hiding it. She'll eventually feel the performance beneath it. Not because women are mystical detectors of insincerity, but because performance has texture, and that texture accumulates over time. The manufactured distance has a slightly hollow quality. The attention feels like it's working towards something. The confidence has a faint neediness underneath it. And a man who thinks he's successfully running a set of behaviors will find himself confused again when it stops working, because he was never actually fixing the problem. He was decorating it. The man who doesn't need tactics is the man whose life is genuinely in motion. He has work he cares about. He has friendships with depth. He has opinions he's willing to hold against pressure. He has a physical life, a creative life, some project or discipline or obsession that makes him interesting to himself. Not because those things are attractive to women, though they often are, but because they are the actual contents of a full interior. And a full interior is the foundation from which everything else becomes real rather than performed. And there's a specific quality to this kind of fullness that's worth naming because it's easy to misunderstand. It's not about being busy. Being busy is a different thing. It's a schedule full of obligations that you drag yourself through. Fullness is something else. It's engagement. It's the feeling of genuinely caring about what you're doing when you're doing it. It's having something you want to return to. That quality radiates. It's not performable, but it's entirely buildable. And the man who is actively building it, even imperfectly, even at the beginning, is already carrying a different signal than the man who is waiting for a relationship to give him something to care about. So here's the honest question, and it's the only one that matters after everything you've just heard. Is your life full enough right now that your rhythms are natural? That your interest in her comes from genuine curiosity rather than the need to be chosen? That your calm comes from being centered rather than from trying to appear that way? Because if the answer is yes, even partially, even imperfectly, then everything changes. Your texts carry different weight. Your presence creates different gravity. Your absence opens a different kind of space in her thinking. The signals are clean, and clean signals don't need to be engineered. And if the answer is no, if you are honest with yourself and realize that you've been using distance as a weapon, or chasing with too much visibility, or collapsing your schedule around someone who hasn't yet earned that, then the work isn't reading more about attraction dynamics. The work is building something worth interrupting, something worth coming back to, something that makes you a person you'd want to be around. Desire doesn't follow strategy. It follows signal. And the signal comes from who you actually are when no one is watching. That's the work, not the tactics, not the timing, not the carefully engineered moments of distance. The interior. Build something real in there, tend to it seriously, and everything else becomes honest. And honest is what lasts long after clever has worn completely through.